The moment that changed everything happened on a Monday morning in September when my courtroom doors opened and in walked someone who'd married into the most famous family in the world, then spent years claiming she was the victim. Meghan Markle, 43 years old, Duchess of Sussex, former actress turned royal turned activist turned media mogul, wife of Prince Harry, net worth estimated at $60 million from her Netflix deal worth $100 million, Spotify deal, book deals, and various business ventures capitalizing on her royal connection while simultaneously claiming that same connection traumatized her. She walked in dressed in a cream Dior suit worth $8,000, wearing Princess Diana's bracelet worth $75,000, Cartier earrings, and carrying a Gucci handbag. Behind her came an intimidating legal team, 6 attorneys from Sunshine Sachs, the crisis PR firm that had managed her image for years, 3 publicists, 2 royal protection officers that Harry had insisted on paying for privately, and a documentary crew filming for an upcoming Netflix series about her journey as a victim of institutional racism and royal cruelty. But sitting in the gallery, looking terrified and out of place, was someone who represented the invisible people Meghan claimed to champion. Margaret Stevens, 61 years old, British, former housekeeper at Kensington Palace for 28 years. She'd served Queen Elizabeth, Prince William, Prince Harry, and briefly, Meghan Markle during her time as a working royal. Margaret wore a simple dress from Marks & Spencer, her hands showing years of service work, her face carrying healing bruises from where Meghan had struck her 4 weeks ago during a visit to a charity event in New York where Margaret had been working as temporary staff. The charges were assault and battery, criminal threatening, and harassment. According to police reports and witness statements from 12 other staff members, Meghan had attended a charity gala for disadvantaged women at the Plaza Hotel. Margaret, who'd retired from palace service and moved to New York to be near her daughter, had been hired as part of the event staff, not knowing Meghan would be attending. When they encountered each other in the private preparation room, Meghan had immediately recognized Margaret as one of the palace staff she'd clashed with during her brief time as a working royal. According to witnesses, Meghan had accused Margaret of leaking stories to the British press, of being part of the palace conspiracy against her, of working to destroy her reputation. When Margaret tried to explain she'd never spoken to press in 28 years of service, Meghan had become enraged, struck Margaret across the face, grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her while screaming that palace staff had ruined her life. Security separated them, police were called, and now Meghan stood in my courtroom, clearly believing her story of being oppressed by the royal family, her mixed-race identity, her celebrity status, and her carefully crafted public image as a humanitarian would make this disappear. What I did in the next 40 minutes didn't just shock the courtroom. It created an international incident, divided public opinion across 2 continents, sparked furious debates about victimhood and accountability, and proved that in America, when the system works correctly, no amount of royal titles, no amount of Oprah interviews, no carefully constructed victim narrative places anyone above the law. If you believe that being treated badly doesn't give you the right to treat others badly, that claiming victimhood doesn't exempt you from being a perpetrator, that judges must defend working people even when facing someone with palace connections and a Netflix platform, hit that subscribe button right now because what I'm about to do will show you that even a duchess faces American justice. Ms. Markle, I began, using her legal name rather than her royal title, because in my courtroom, titles mean nothing. You're charged with assault and battery against Margaret Stevens, criminal threatening, and harassment. How do you plead? Her lead attorney stood immediately. Claire Bennett, a powerhouse lawyer who'd represented celebrities in dozens of high-profile cases. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. And before we proceed, I want to address the atmosphere of this case. My client is Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. She's a member of the British royal family who has endured unprecedented levels of racist abuse, institutional gaslighting, and coordinated attacks from both the British press and palace insiders. This case must be understood in that context. Ms. Bennett, your client is charged with hitting a 61-year-old woman. The context is assault. That's what we're here to address. Your Honor, with respect, my client is a woman of color who married into a predominantly white institution that systematically marginalized her, silenced her, and ultimately drove her and her husband out of the country. Ms. Stevens was part of that institution. She was part of the system that harmed my client. This incident was a trauma response. Counselor, trauma doesn't justify violence. Your client is 43 years old. She's an adult. She's responsible for her actions regardless of her past experiences. Your Honor, We're prepared to present extensive evidence of the psychological abuse my client suffered during her time as a working royal. We have statements from mental health professionals diagnosing her with PTSD. We have documentation of the racist press coverage. We have testimony about how palace staff, including Ms. Stevens, participated in a culture of undermining and bullying my client. Ms. Bennett, is Ms. Stevens charged with bullying your client? No. Your client is charged with assaulting Ms. Stevens. Stay focused. I turned to Meghan. Ms. Markle, how do you plead? She stood gracefully, with the practiced poise of someone who'd spent years in front of cameras. When she spoke, her voice carried that carefully modulated tone she'd perfected, the one that mixed vulnerability with strength, victim with survivor. Your Honor, I plead not guilty. What happened that night was a culmination of years of abuse. When I saw Ms. Stevens, I experienced a triggering flashback to my time in the palace when staff members would deliberately undermine me, leak private conversations, and participate in a coordinated campaign to destroy my reputation and mental health. I reacted from a place of deep trauma. I should not be criminalized for a trauma response to seeing one of my abusers. Ms. Markle, you're claiming Ms. Stevens abused you? She was part of the system, Your Honor. She worked in an institution that protected abusers and punished victims. She stood by while I was being destroyed. That makes her complicit. Did Ms. Stevens personally do anything to harm you? Silence is complicity, Your Honor. Her refusal to speak up, to defend me, to acknowledge the racism and cruelty I faced, that's harm. That's violence. I set down my pen carefully. Ms. Markle, we'll hear the evidence. Ms. Park, please proceed. Assistant District Attorney Linda Park approached. Your Honor, we have witness statements from 12 staff members who were present during the incident, security footage from the Plaza Hotel, and audio recordings from several witnesses' phones. May I present them? I nodded. The lights dimmed. The first video showed the Plaza Hotel's private preparation area where VIP guests could touch up makeup and prepare before entering the main ballroom. Meghan entered with her team, looking elegant and composed. Margaret was across the room, organizing code check tickets, her back to the door. One of Meghan's assistants noticed Margaret first. The audio picked up her whispered comment. Oh no, that's Margaret Stevens. She used to work at Kensington. Meghan's head snapped toward Margaret. The camera caught her face transforming, elegant composure melting into rage. She walked directly toward Margaret, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Meghan's voice, sharp and loud. You. I know you. You're Margaret Stevens. You worked at Kensington Palace. Margaret turned, clearly surprised. She smiled politely, that professional service worker smile. Yes, ma'am, I did. I retired last year. It's lovely to see. Meghan's voice, cutting her off. Don't pretend this is a pleasant coincidence. You were one of them. You were part of the staff that made my life hell. Margaret's voice, confused. Ma'am, I'm not sure what you mean. I always tried to be respectful and... Meghan's voice, getting louder. Respectful? You stood by while I was being destroyed. You heard the racist comments. You saw how they treated me differently. And you did nothing. You're just as guilty as the rest of them. Other staff members were stopping, watching. Meghan's team was trying to pull her away, whispering that people were filming. Meghan ignored them. Margaret's voice, still professional despite visible distress. Ms. Markle, I never spoke to any press. I never participated in any gossip. I did my job, that's all. Meghan stepped closer, invading Margaret's personal space. Doing your job? Your job was to serve a racist institution. Your job was to prop up a system that drove me to suicidal thoughts. Do you know I considered suicide because of what that place did to me? Do you know Harry and I lost a baby because of the stress? And people like you just kept serving tea and making beds and pretending everything was fine. Margaret's voice, gentle. Ma'am, I'm truly sorry you suffered. But I was just a housekeeper. I had no power. I was just trying to keep my job to support my family. Meghan's voice, venomous. Just a housekeeper. Just following orders. That's what they all say. But you were there. You saw things. And you chose silence. You chose their side. Margaret's voice, firmer now. Ma'am, there were no sides. I served everyone equally. I served you the same way I served everyone else. That's when Meghan struck her. The camera caught it clearly. An open-handed slap across Margaret's face, hard enough that the sound echoed in the room. Margaret stumbled backward, her hand going to her cheek, shock and pain on her face. Meghan's voice, screaming now. You served me? You undermined me. All of you. You whispered about me. You made me feel crazy. You participated in a campaign to gaslight me and drive me out. She grabbed Margaret by both shoulders and shook her violently. Margaret was trying to protect herself, her hands up defensively. Meghan's voice. You ruined my life. You took everything from me. My title, my reputation, my mental health. You and all the other palace staff who pretended to be professional while destroying me behind closed doors. Security rushed in, pulling Meghan away. She was still screaming, still accusing, as her team surrounded her. Margaret was on the floor now, where she'd fallen during the confrontation, crying, other staff members helping her up. One of Meghan's publicists could be heard saying, "Don't worry, we'll spin this. We'll say she attacked you first. We'll say it's more palace conspiracy." The second video showed police arriving. Meghan initially refused to cooperate, stating she had diplomatic immunity as a duchess. Officers explained that titles don't grant immunity in the United States. Meghan then claimed self-defense, saying Margaret had come at her aggressively. Multiple witnesses contradicted this immediately. When the lights came back on, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. I looked at Meghan, whose face showed calculated composure now, the rage completely hidden, replaced by that vulnerable victim expression she'd perfected. Ms. Markle, you just watched yourself attack a woman who was minding her own business, doing her job. You slapped her, you grabbed her and shook her. You screamed accusations at her. Do you still maintain your innocence? Claire Bennett stood immediately. Your Honor, my client was experiencing a severe PTSD episode triggered by encountering someone connected to her trauma. This is a documented medical condition. We have Dr. Patricia Morrison, a renowned trauma specialist, prepared to testify that my client's actions were an involuntary psychological response to trauma stimuli. Ms. Bennett, your client walked across a room to confront Ms. Stevens. She had a conversation. She made accusations. She made conscious choices. That's not an involuntary response. That's assault. Your Honor, years of racist abuse and institutional gaslighting have left my client with complex trauma. Seeing Ms. Stevens triggered memories of, Counselor, I've heard enough. Ms. Markle, you're claiming Ms. Stevens personally harmed you during your time at the palace. What specifically did she do to you? Meghan stood, and when she spoke, her voice took on that rehearsed quality from her interviews, each word carefully chosen for maximum emotional impact. Your Honor, Margaret Stevens was part of a household staff that engaged in a systematic campaign of psychological abuse against me. They would deliberately delay bringing me items I requested. They would whisper and stop talking when I entered rooms. They would follow protocols for other royals but claim protocols didn't exist when I asked for the same treatment. They created an atmosphere of hostility that made me feel unwelcome, unsafe, and ultimately drove me to a breaking point where I couldn't leave my room, couldn't stop crying, and seriously considered ending my life. Ms. Markle, did you report this behavior to palace management? Your Honor, the palace was the problem. HR protected the institution, not individuals. When I reported concerns, I was told I was being difficult. I was told that's just how things work. I was gaslit into believing my reality was wrong. Did Ms. Stevens specifically do any of these things you described? She was part of it. She witnessed it. She didn't speak up. That's complicity. Ms. Stevens, please approach. Margaret stood slowly, moving stiffly, still recovering from the assault. When she reached the front, I could see she'd been crying. Her accent was distinctly British, working-class London, the kind that immediately signaled decades of service work. Ms. Stevens, tell me about your time working at Kensington Palace. She spoke softly, with dignity despite obvious distress. Your Honor, I worked at Kensington Palace for 28 years. I started as a junior housemaid when I was 33. I served under Queen Elizabeth, Prince Charles, Prince William, and briefly, Prince Harry and Ms. Markle. I took pride in my work. I loved my job. I considered it an honor to serve. Did you ever mistreat Ms. Markle? Never, Your Honor. Never once. I treated her exactly as I treated everyone. With respect and professionalism. Did you witness others mistreating her? Your Honor, the palace is a formal place. There are protocols. Sometimes Ms. Markle found those protocols confusing or restrictive. She came from a different world, Hollywood, where things are more casual. The adjustment was difficult for her. But I never saw anyone treat her cruelly. I never heard racist comments. I never witnessed the campaign she describes. Ms. Markle claims you were complicit through your silence. Margaret's voice broke slightly. Your Honor, I'm a housekeeper. I'm not educated like Ms. Markle. I left school at 16. I've cleaned rooms my entire life. When Ms. Markle was at the palace, I did my job. I brought her tea. I changed her sheets. I was polite and professional. What more could I have done? I had no power. I was just trying to keep my position to support my daughter who was at university. She looked at Meghan directly. Ms. Markle, I watched your wedding. I cried happy tears. I thought it was beautiful that Prince Harry found someone who made him happy. When you left the royal family, I felt sad for you both, but I understood wanting to protect your family. I never spoke ill of you. Not once. Not to press, not to friends, not to anyone. That night at the plaza, I was working a shift to earn extra money for my granddaughter's school fees. I didn't know you'd be there. When I saw you, I was genuinely pleased. I thought maybe we could have a kind word. But you looked at me like I was your enemy. You accused me of things I never did. And then you hit me. Tears streamed down her face. I'm 61 years old. I've never been struck by anyone in my life. You hit me hard enough to bruise my face. You shook me so violently I've had headaches ever since. And then I had to read in the papers that you're the victim in this. That I'm part of your trauma. But I never hurt you. I only ever tried to serve you well. The courtroom was silent except for Margaret's quiet crying. I looked at Meghan, who sat with perfect posture, her face showing carefully calibrated sadness, but her eyes were calculating, already thinking about how to manage this narrative. Ms. Markle, you heard Ms. Stevens's testimony. She says she never harmed you. Multiple witnesses say she treated you professionally. Yet you physically attacked her because of your assumptions about her. What do you have to say? Meghan stood. Your Honor, I understand Ms. Stevens believes she did nothing wrong. But that's how systemic oppression works. The people participating in it often don't even see it. They think they're just doing their jobs, just following protocols, just staying silent. But silence upholds oppression. Not speaking out makes you part of the problem. So you're saying hitting her was justified? I'm saying I should be treated with the same compassion I needed when I was being destroyed by that institution. I'm saying my trauma is valid. I'm saying mental health matters. I'm saying that as a woman of color navigating a predominantly white institution, I experienced harm in ways Ms. Stevens might not be able to understand. Ms. Markle, you're not answering the question. You hit a 61-year-old woman. Was that justified? She paused, and I could see her recalibrating. Your Honor, I regret that the encounter became physical. I wish I had had better tools to manage my triggered response. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret naming my abuse. And I don't think I should be criminalized for having a trauma response. Ms. Markle, stand up. She stood, graceful and composed, every inch the Duchess. Ms. Markle, you're 43 years old. You're an intelligent, successful, wealthy woman. You've written books. You've produced content. You've given countless interviews about your experiences. You have power, platform, and resources most people can't imagine. Yet you stood in this courtroom and claimed victimhood to justify assaulting a working-class elderly woman who spent 28 years in service and never once spoke publicly against you. Here is my finding. You are guilty of assault and battery. The video evidence is irrefutable. You struck Margaret Stevens without provocation. You are guilty of harassment. You verbally abused her, made false accusations, and created a hostile encounter. You are guilty of criminal threatening because your accusations and attack created fear for her safety. Meghan's face flickered with surprise. Your Honor, this verdict ignores the context of, Ms. Markle, I've heard your context. You experienced difficulty adjusting to royal life. You felt you were treated unfairly. You struggled with mental health. All of that may be true. But none of it gives you the right to assault someone. Here is your sentence. For assault and battery, 1 year in county jail. For harassment, 6 months to be served consecutively. For criminal threatening, 6 months. Total of 2 years in custody. The courtroom erupted. Her attorneys were shouting. Her publicists were frantically typing. The documentary crew was capturing everything. Meghan herself looked genuinely shocked, like she'd never once considered this outcome possible. Claire Bennett was screaming. Your Honor, 2 years for a trauma response? This is outrageous. My client is a mother of 2 young children. She has business obligations. She has a documentary series contracted. This is clearly influenced by anti-Meghan bias in the media. Counselor, your client is being sentenced for assault, not for being unpopular. Plenty of mothers go to jail for committing crimes. Your client's business deals are not my concern. Additionally, I'm ordering Ms. Markle to pay $750,000 in restitution to Margaret Stevens. This includes medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, and a substantial amount because your client has the resources to pay it and because she used her platform and privilege to harm someone with far less power. I'm also issuing a permanent restraining order prohibiting Ms. Markle from any contact with Ms. Stevens and prohibiting her from discussing Ms. Stevens in any of her media productions. Meghan found her voice, and for the first time, the carefully constructed facade cracked. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I'm the Duchess of Sussex. I have a platform. I have followers. I have contracts. I'm telling the story of marginalized people. Imprisoning me is. Ms. Markle, in America, we don't have duchesses. We don't have titles. We have citizens. And citizens who commit assault go to jail. Your story, your platform, your contracts are irrelevant to justice. This is persecution. This is because I spoke out against the royal family. This is because I refused to be silent. Ms. Markle, this is because you hit someone. That's all. Not because of your race, not because of your story, not because of your advocacy. Because you committed violence. She shook her head, that perfect hair not moving. Harry will fix this. Our lawyers will appeal. Netflix will document this injustice. The world will see how I'm being treated. Ms. Markle, threaten me one more time with your husband's title, your lawyers, or your Netflix deal, and I'll add contempt of court. Bailiff, take her into custody. Officers moved forward. Meghan pulled away, looking at her attorneys desperately. Call Harry. Get the embassy involved. Contact our British lawyers. This isn't over. As they handcuffed her, she was still performing, still controlling her narrative. The documentary crew was still filming. She looked directly into the camera. This is what happens when you speak truth to power. They silence you, but I won't be silenced. My story will be told. Margaret Stevens stood to leave. Meghan called out to her. I hope you're happy. You've successfully played the victim and turned everyone against me. Just like the palace trained you. Margaret stopped, turned back. Her voice was soft but clear. Ms. Markle, I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to work my shift, earn money for my granddaughter, and go home. You chose to attack me. You chose to make me part of your story. I hope someday you find peace. I truly do. The doors closed with Meghan still shouting about persecution, about racism, about institutional conspiracy. Within an hour, it was global news. The British press went into overdrive. American media was divided. Meghan's supporters claimed the verdict was racist, that she was being punished for speaking out. Others said finally she faced accountability for her actions. Prince Harry issued a statement through their lawyers. The Duchess of Sussex has endured unprecedented levels of abuse, and this verdict compounds that injustice. We will be appealing immediately and are confident the truth will prevail. But 3 months later, the New York Court of Appeals upheld my sentence unanimously. Their opinion stated, trauma, while worthy of compassion, does not exempt anyone from criminal responsibility. The defendant's status as a public figure who claims victimhood does not diminish her culpability for committing assault. Judge Caprio's sentence appropriately balances the defendant's mental health history with the victim's right to justice. Meghan Markle is currently serving her sentence at Rose M. Singer Center on Rikers Island. Margaret Stevens received her restitution, retired fully, and moved to Florida to be near her daughter and granddaughter. She gave one interview, saying, I forgive the Duchess. I hope she gets the help she needs. But I'm glad justice was served. Not just for me, but for all the working people who've been hurt by those with power and then blamed for it. If this story moved you, subscribe. Share it with anyone who needs to understand that being a victim in one situation doesn't give you permission to victimize others, that mental health struggles don't excuse violence, that claiming marginalization while attacking someone with less power is hypocrisy. Meghan Markle used her royal title, her wealth, and her victim narrative in my courtroom. I gave her 2 years in jail and proved that in America, no one, not even a duchess with a Netflix deal, is above the law.